We're Type Electives. We're an online design school shaping the future of type, co-founded by Lynne and myself, Juan Villanueva. We offer courses that go beyond traditional type design education, including online classes focused on letter forms, type design, lettering, creative technology. And our faculty is made up of people who approach their practice from a place of respect, responsibility, criticality, and love. And we are excited to work with students interested in exploring a future founded in those principles. Today is the third session of our lecture series where we invite new and established voices to share their stories, knowledge, and ideas with the community. And for this season, we are shaking things up a little bit. We're doing an AMA, sorry, which means Ask Me Anything. So thanks for everyone who submitted your questions. We've grouped them into these four categories. And the first two were getting started in type, then type design theory and practice. The recordings for those are already on the website. So please check them out and share with others if you find them helpful. Today, we'll be talking about font engineering and QA, and in the upcoming weeks, we'll be talking about finishing and publishing a typeface with a focus on business and marketing. So make sure to sign up and join us. And to make this series a little bit more practical and accessible, we're sharing a couple of resources and slides at the beginning of this conversation. We also have two courses currently open for registration. Foundations of Kinetic Type with Candice Botello, and Crash Course in Type Design with Libby Bischoff. We still have a few seats open, so please sign up as soon as you can. It's called Thank you for everyone who applied for the scholarships. You should all have gotten emails. If not, check your inbox. And yeah, if you want to learn the basics of animation or type design, now is your chance. We're also excited to be collaborating with Letrastica, a community of people who love typography, and they're based in Guadalajara, Mexico, with members from all over the world. Every 2 years, they organize this conference, which will take place in a couple of weeks, actually, from the 23rd to the 26th of October. So I think they're almost sold out. So if you want to go, now's your chance. Get your ticket and book your flights. Check out letrustica.com. And to
We'll
finish
all
this,
be there.
yeah, they'll see us in person. To finish this housekeeping, just reminding you to follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our newsletter to be the first to know about our upcoming classes and events. We have a lot of things planned for next year, and we can't wait to share. So stay tuned, and we also appreciate your support, spreading the word about our classes and our events with your friends. And if you can support us with a donation, please do. It makes everything possible, scholarships, events, and things like that. And with those basics covers, we want to introduce Romina Hernández.
Yes. So we're very, very, very excited to have Ro. I mean, just the vibes are always good. Romina Hernandez is a type designer, programmer, letterer, and occasional woodworker, which I didn't know about, from Mexico City. She holds a bachelor's in industrial design and is a graduate of the Type Media program in The Hague, Netherlands. She's self-taught in everything else. And we were just like gushing about Rose. What did you say? Game Boy. Sorry, you said a word and I'm gonna botch this.
Yeah, I'll mute. It's a Linux handheld emulation thingy. It's in the camera, I think.
Oh, every time I talk to Rose, they're like, oh, there's another rabbit hole. It's amazing. And yeah, we're gonna have a great time. Ro now spends her days developing typefaces and design tools with her team at tortilla.studio, so check that out. Ro is a proudly trans feminist, an avid tea drinker, a cat lady, and she sometimes enjoys writing about herself in the third person. And I'll drop her socials in the chat as well. We're gonna launch into a little bit of uh, like terminology and like some of like the very basics before we launch into our 3-person AMA session. But we're very excited for Ro. All right, so the first question that we wanted to answer just with a couple of slides so everybody is on the same page is this question that we received, which is, what's the type designer's role in the type design process? When do they come in? What do they do? Are they coding? You know, what are things that they do? So we wanted to take you through an overview of the process. And just keep in mind that like specifics vary a lot for every project, every designer, every foundry. So like these are just like the basic overarching concepts of the type design process. So to start with, there might be concept and ideation, drawing, and then like maybe there's like a style expansion or family expansion that happens. And then you kern, which means like you're adjusting all the individual spacing combinations. and there's features and programming, masters and QA, licensing, distribution, marketing. If you don't know what a lot of these mean, well, we're going to cover it. All right. And just so you know, when folks are talking about like, oh, I'm doing type design production, or like I'm looking for someone to do production, that might be these things called like, expanding the family, maybe like extending a character set. Sometimes it could be kerning. It really depends on the person. Maybe it's about like writing like open type features, or like, if it's like a handwriting like typeface, making sure like the same A doesn't appear at the same time, like twice in a row or something like that. And when we talk about engineering, we might also be talking about like the very same like open type features programming, are all the lines like in tip-top shape with all their curves and points and all of things like that. Mastering and Q&A, which we'll talk about in a second. Right. So so one thing to note is that when folks are talking about like production, engineering, blah, 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 all these things, sometimes it's a little different for everyone, or like every foundry, because they work in different ways. An engineer who is performing certain roles at one foundry, like their role might be defined slightly different at another one. So just wanted to get that out there. And so for bare basics, when you start with a concept and ideation, some of the questions that a tech designer might ask themselves is like, who is this typeface for? Where is this going to be used for? What should I research? What kind of things should I research? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What are the vibes, right? All of these things that goes into just defining a brief of this project. And afterwards, there will be some drawing. A lot of designers love to start with like a pencil sketch or an ink sketch writing. Some folks might go straight into the computer. And then there's vectorization, right? Like you have this like concept of a drawing, and then you're refining it on the computer in like your font editor of choice. And then you're spacing things just to make sure all the letters are working very well as a system, right? So so commonly like we talk about like H string, H and O strings, N and O strings, like to just make sure that like all these letters look right in the most average combination possible. And of course, like this is not a linear process. Like sometimes you're spacing things and you're like, this little G ear is like just not looking great. And you have to go back to the drawing board and you like do this all over and over again. So like this is like not a linear process. And I have it in brackets like maybe, because nowadays we're very used to the idea of a typeface having like a bazillion different styles. Like the same typeface might have like ultra hair horse thin all the way to like ultra bold that like is, just the widest thing in the world. Maybe there's like a fuzzy version, maybe there's an italic, maybe there's a script version, right? But like, it doesn't need to be. So like this is like why it's in like, brackets. But anyway, so after like the outlines are pretty much done, or if you think it's done at the very least, then you kern, which means that you're creating very specific pairs. Often like a word that is like notoriously hard is like words that have like the capital A and the capital T, for example, where you can imagine like a capital letter A has these like splayed legs on the bottom, and a capital letter T is very wide on the top, right? So like you need to put them a little bit closer together to make sure that like gap isn't like super wide. And so like that's like the nitty gritty that like type designers will do, where they look at a list of like A, A, C, blah, 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 A, Z. And then you start with like B, A, B, C, B, like it's a really tedious process, but that's what type design is all about. I love Carl in the chat. That's exactly how I look on day 10 of kerning, just like mad at your computer. Anyhow, so afterwards, or again, like this might be interspersed with drawing if you're doing it all at the same time. There might be features and programming. This might cover something as practical as like what kind of letter forms should be shown when it's in certain languages, right? Like there's a lot of nuances even for the same script. If they're in different regions, like certain like marks might need to be put in slightly different places, or maybe a shape of a letter might be slightly different. As I said before, like a handwriting typeface is like the classic thing where like somebody would probably want to like program something to make sure that it looks like a natural connected forms appearing, and maybe like things are more organic looking, or maybe it's just like this is like a ransom letter like font, and like you just want to make sure that like every time you type it, it just looks crazier and crazier. Who knows? And so mastering and Q&A, which we'll cover in depth with Ro today, it covers also a lot of things. And this might be like a very specific question, such as like, does my font file work in Word or does it break? Or like, oh, like, will this work on like my phone? Will this work on an Android phone or whatever? Can this work in this app? Or like it might be even as specific as, oh, I need my like font file to work in this like esoteric machine and it needs to look right. And like this might be like something that has to do with like the information embedded in the font file and not even like the outlines. Or there's things called like hinting, which is trying to make sure your typeface looks good at like lower resolutions. All these different things. And Q&A means like you're just like doing quality assurance. So like you're trying to make things as tip-top shape as possible, and then also just like testing it out to make sure that it really works in the out in the real world, in case like somebody has like a Windows XP somewhere, which you would be surprised by the amount of people that do. So everything needs to be into consideration. Yeah, and then all the way at the end, we have licensing, distribution, marketing, like things that are very, very important, but you don't even get to it until you're like done with the whole thing, right? Like, what is the terms of your license? Like, are you letting people use it for whatever? Are you letting people use it for like certain use cases? Oh, you can put it on a website, but if it's like over a certain amount of people, you need to pay me more. Or maybe, as long as they credit you, is completely fine. You might say like, hey, if you are supporting, if you can't use this for things that harm puppies, like whatever, right? Like there's like terms of like the thing that you made. And there's like marketing and distribution, like how are you going to distribute this thing? Are there any third-party platforms that will carry your typeface and sell these font files for you? How are you marketing it, like to show like designers out in the world that this is the optimal use case for your typeface? But that's a lot of things. That's a lot of things. All right. So with that, I'll hand it off to Juan.
Another question we got is, where can you learn about font engineering? And the typical answer is generally people have learned this on the job itself, or like looking through documents, trying to figure out how to finish a font. Luckily nowadays, you can find things online. There are online classes. So this is the Glyphs website, the events part of it, and they have a lot of workshops going on. They do a really good job at offering post-production Q&A engineering kind of events. So make sure to check them out and also check out similar offerings from the font software that you're using. The next thing, another way of learning is for learning from the community itself. Was an article recently where Ro was interviewed by Ilya Ruderman, or with Ilya Ruderman, and they have a really interesting conversation about what is font engineering, mastering, and QA. So we're going to be talking about that today, but I would also recommend to check that interview. Then there's also a talk by Rosalie Wagner that she gave at ATyPi back in 2022. That's still pretty relevant because font engineering, again, it's a very niche part of the field of type design, but it's also a very important field that perhaps needs more light put into it. And the last is an article by Tom Rickner for the Monotype website, where he talks about, again, the process that it takes to make a font, become a product. It takes a lot of people, or at least people with very, very deep knowledge about the technology. Another way you can learn is by attending conferences, stalking the forums and just looking at gathering your resources. As Lynn mentioned, every foundry, every typeface, every project is unique. So it's really useful for you to like know who to reach out or even how to ask the question that you're looking for. So ATyPi Tech Talks would happen in 2022. I hope they come back again because that was really useful to just get up to date with the latest tech and see, who's working on those platforms. Also, the tools for font engineering by in the Type Resources website by Justin Penner, also very useful, which provides links to a lot of the documentation, which is a lot of the work that type engineers do. They look at the documentation to make sure they can solve those technical problems. And then, Tel Lemming, who also has a lot of has made a lot of tools in in the past for type designers and font engineers. And one of his best books that came out, it's online, is the OpenType Cookbook. So if you're interested in getting learning the basics of OpenType and even getting more advanced knowledge, you should check that out. And when in doubt, ask a fellow font engineer. And if you don't know where they are, you're in the right place because we have Ro here and Ro can tell us more about it. So with those basics covered, we want to welcome Romina and Ro Hernandez. So let me stop sharing now and get our faces on the main screen.
Hey,
Ooh, oh my goodness. Who is this? Who is
I'm
this?
being dog attacked. Say hi. Say hi at least. Be camera ready. Well, say hi.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So cute. This is
She
why I
also
love
helps
Zoom
with the
calls.
engineering and the QA. Like sometimes
Amazing.
pointing out parents or something. Yeah.
Oh, look at this
Anyway, hi.
papa. Hello, everyone. Oh, yes. And as a reminder, if you have any questions while we are answering the questions that we already received, make sure to put it in the chat. Make sure to put it in the Q&A function. If you can't find it, just put it in the chat and we'll save them for you. All right, Ro, is there anything that you would like to add just as like foundational basics or concepts before we launch into the list of
Foundational.
questions? I mean, you don't have to, but in
Um,
case you feel like
I
we
guess
missed
there
anything.
is one because
Hmm.
I might say this like offhandedly a couple of times, or maybe when I refer to the spec, I'm not talking about like a speck of dust. It's a spec of the specification, which is a very long and very detailed and sometimes boring, sometimes confusing, sometimes not. A document published by Microsoft. It's on learn.microsoft.com/nus/typography/opentype/spec if you want to go there. Just
Oh my
Google it.
goodness.
But that's pretty much like the technical manual that says the technical stuff that the Microsoft engineers who did the bits and the books in Microsoft and in the typesetters, they expect those things. So that's kind of one of the last resource things that you have to follow in pretty much all of the things that we would be talking about here. So I might say spec, offhandedly, I'm talking about that document, that thing, and those things. Yeah, I guess that's a good blanket thing because it comes up like all the time.
Thank you, Creighton, for asking the question about where to link. We'll be saying a lot of things that maybe make no sense for regular people, like spec or OpenType spec or whatever. Make sure you put it in the chat so that we can find the links and send them to you, because I know a lot of this might be a little bit obscure.
Yeah. And perhaps like we can start with the question of like there were a lot of questions that we got online about how do you get started in uh and like type design engineering, like how do you learn these things? How do you keep up to date? Like so maybe like if you wanted to give us a little overview, Ro, of like maybe how you got inspired and started or things that you look at, like just like a general
Sure.
overview, if you will.
I guess like the introduction that Nick gave me, that I'm a super nerd and I get hyper focused on stuff like monthly, is a good pointer to what my personality is like. And like many engineers that I've met we are like this. We get hyper focused on the spec. We read it through. We try to understand what the hell all of those technical words are saying, and that's how I got into it. I got a friend, Monica, asked a lot of us like last week, how long had you been into type? Like, when did you take your first thing? And my first class was 2011. But in 2011, there were so many, so fewer resources than there are now about type and about engineering and about everything. But I've been like chronically online since always. And one of my hyperfixations was type at some point. So I started getting into forums and like looking at who's doing what, like who's this Paul van der Laan guy that replies on type drawers? What has he done? Does he have such strong opinions? Why does this other guy, Frank Blockland, for example, why does he have like other conflicting opinions? And like got into the gossip and the chisme of it that was my first approach to like very opinionated people who know the technical stuff, like sometimes upside down, and they're doing things in like a very well, they have their own foundries, they produce type for people, so they've made a lot of mistakes probably, they know how to not make them again. And like I started by stalking them a little bit online, like saying type chisme, yeah, exactly, looking at what they were doing. I think that was mostly kind of the only way to get into it in 2011. Now there's more resources that you can go to with more guides, less stalking, but stalking is also good. Like get into the Mastodon, into the type.social. There's people like posting tips and things and that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess go look at what other designers or engineers are doing, what projects are happening, and whatever spikes your interest and how do they do that, in what's behind that, how do they get there with for example, I'm gonna say underwear is like a very spectacular type foundry, and some of their fonts do very amazing stuff, and I was like, but how? And then you go in and then you try to dissect them, maybe look at the code, see if they have lectures. They do, by the way, underwear specifically, and just like try to figure out how things are made. It also helps for me that I'm an industrial designer, so I do know a little bit of how things are made in like the physical world. So I took like metal and wood things in college, and that kind of gave me another perspective on like, oh, there's people who specialize in making stuff and in materials. So there must be that same role in type, and I guess that's what I am now. I guess does that answer some of it? At least that was my experience, and I think it's a nice way to get into it because you end up knowing people also.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's just like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, where like you're interested and then like you just make yourself the expert in the process.
Yeah, pretty much. It's yeah, just look at the problems that have popped up for people and then file them somewhere in your brain, and then years later maybe it's like, I wonder if that was that thing that Frank was talking about somewhere. And sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, but sometimes you learn stuff by that issue. And yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so perhaps we'll launch into the list of questions that we have.
Mhm.
And we have the question about, we have a couple questions about the 1,000 unit grid. And so Micah in the chat is asking about, like, I have the question about the 1,000 unit EM grid. What are the implications of a denser grid now that computers are on average more powerful? And we have a related question, which is how important is this 1,000 unit grid? And when is it appropriate to change this? And yeah, I think it's the same question, like wrapped in the same idea of the 1,000 unit grid.
Yeah. I like the question about the grid because it kind of gets into the basics of where your points are. Like I have a grid here, and if it blurs it out, it's just like it's just dots. But a grid is like type is made up, as everything in this world is, and in order to present it in computers, you need to tell computers type in a way that they understand. And the way that we have found is a grid of squares in which you can say start a line from here to here, from say 0.0, which would be your starting point, to 0.100, comma 100, which would be like here maybe. So that's your grid. It's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah. And for, I don't know, most normal fonts, I'm doing big, huge, scary quotes here because what is a normal font? Is it Latin? I don't know. I hope not. But anyway, for a normal font, 1,000 units is like the standard, the basic. You just open your editor and you most likely have a 1,000 unit grid. And that's enough for a normal font, for most glyphs, for most small details to be rendered nicely. Like the smallest serif might be a couple, 2, 10, 15 units, one of those grid units to pick, and that's fine. But there might come a point in which, let's say, you're drawing something that's really, really thin, and then you draw your super hairline thing. But then no matter where you place the point, if it's like in coordinate 21, it looks bad. And in 22, it looks worse. And in 20, it looks even worse. So there's nowhere to go. You need more fine detail. So then you would like, okay, I guess I would double my grid. And then I have twice as much resolution, twice as much specificity in where the points go for my super thin design, for a super busy design, for some non-Latin characters that need more stuff. And I guess that's a nice way that Mike phrased it, because the computers right now, I don't think they would break a sweat with like a 10,000 unit grid, probably. But the thing is that nobody expects that. Most software, most typesetters, most people, most things that use fonts kind of expect 1,000 by 1,000 or 1,024 if it's a TTF font, but let's not get into that. I didn't say that if you don't know what that means. So unless you have a good reason to need more specificity and more resolution, don't add it, because it's why? I guess it increases the file size a little bit, but it just like you don't need it. So don't get into problems that you don't need. But if you do, like, yeah, I don't think that computers are gonna break a sweat. Like it's fine. I mean, we can make multi-layer color variable fonts now, so a bigger grid is not going to be a problem. It's just that the spec allows you to do things, but the interpretation that most people take of the spec is 1,000 by 1,000. So some things somewhere might break, and you might not know why it is, and it might be the grid, and you want to avoid that unless you have a good reason to use that. So I guess that would be it about the grid, and about most things really. Most like industry standards, they're just standards because all of us in the industry, we kind of do that, and then it's expected, and then it usually doesn't fail. So go with that if that's good for your font technically. If it's not, then you can explore, but yeah.
Yeah, so basically just like
Yeah.
save yourself the headache and not create any unnecessary problems.
Yeah. Unless your design asks for it. And if your design asks for it, run into the problems and solve them, but don't if you don't.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ro.
Mhm.
That's a great answer. All right. So there's another question about kerning, as many folks do. Is there a system or methodological approach one can take when kerning? Keeping track of multiple kerning values across many glyphs is a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, yes, it is. I wouldn't say there is one. I would say there is, I don't know how many type designs there are, and there's that plus 1,000, because we all have like one or two methods probably. A very good one and like a very structured, complete one though. Put a timer so I wouldn't go too long. A very good one that I pretty much use and that I base a lot of my kerning on. It does have the asterisk that it is not free because it requires Metrics Machine, the software. It relies on a lot of like things that Metrics Machine does. Another tool by Tal Lemming. Tal Lemming, great guy. Look him up. He's a genius in like tools and type stuff. Also makes great fonts. Great guy. But he made Matrix Machine, which is actually supposed to help you with that. It really does. And if you can use Matrix Machine, use it. It's expensive though, but it's worth it if you can swing it. If you can't, though, the documentation for Matrix Machine, even if you're not using it, even if you're doing glyphs or FontLab or Fontra or anything else, it does have a very nice, I'm looking at it right now in, I guess, yeah, that one, extension store, and that one. Make your groups, then groups by the similar characters that have like the same ink in the same places, for example, so that you're kerning mostly the same thing. Then when you have groups of the same relative shapes, for example, let's say an O and an O with an acute, and an O with a diuresis, and an O with a something else, and an O with something else. It's basically kind of the same mass of drawing. So you can kern them together. So you make groups of those. Of similarity on the left side, of similarity on the right side, because you're kerning, on both sides. And then you start making lists that give you like all of the different possibilities with those groups in between other stuff. And then you go through them like just one by one. Just so, for example, and in between context. Context is super important in kerning. Like you need to be fixing the spacing, misalignment, the exception, but according to the rest of your typeface. So that would mean, for example, N's and O's, capital H's and capital O's, zeros and ones, that kind of thing. So you're looking at the pair list that you made before with all of your variations in all of your groups in between context. Look at that page. It has drawings that illustrate kind of what I'm talking about. And then you just, after you have made a list of all the possible things that you could kern in the relevant context, for example, like caps between caps, it doesn't make a lot of sense to, I don't know, kern caps in between emoji sometimes, for example. And then you just go through them and adjust, like trust your eyes and go through the whole thing. And that's a really good, I found like a really good structure, relatively quick. It can actually be very quick if you're like a quick kerner. I've seen people come with a controller, like go like, wow. It makes it relatively enjoyable. If you're Diana Weisman, it makes it enjoyable, supposedly. But that's where I would point you to. Tal has thought a lot about this. He's made a whole app that does this. And even if you don't use the app, he has great tips and a great workflow that you can adapt to work in glyphs, you can adapt to work in plain RoboFont, you can adapt to work in a lot of things. So that would be about kerning. And also, just make it your own. If you don't like something about it, try to optimize it, try to make a script. Ask me how to do that. I'll be happy to help.
Oh, I mean, I think there's also a lot of like personalities like when you approach kerning, right? Like I think like when
True.
folks start out, like they think there is like this like industry list that like everybody does like this, but when you actually get into it, it turns out like someone's like, I spend like one day on kerning and I move on. And besides,
Yeah.
like someone else might be like, I spend a month on kerning, right? Like so there's a lot of variation, I suppose.
Yeah, it's quite a rabbit hole, to be honest. I remember, you could get into a heated debate about should you kern this pair or not. I
Yeah.
think for people that are starting out and like are perhaps this is the first time kerning, I would think of just kern the most difficult pairs and focus on your spacing. But then, like Laurel said, you can build your own lists and then figure out what the list for the particular font is, because you could spend the next 10 years of your life kerning and the font still won't be perfect. So
Yes.
just figure out what's needed to be kerned. Like you don't want to kern, let's say, lowercase and numbers or figures. If that is not going to be used, your typeface is not going to be used that way. But if you're dealing with a typeface that's going to be used, let's say maybe on like a supermarket or something very specific, then yeah, you might have to kern that. Otherwise, it makes no sense. So yeah, don't enjoy your life. Go outside, play, and only spend the time you need for kerning. It's needed. That's it.
Yeah, totally. Plus one on that thing. Like kerning is it's a nice process that it fixes a lot of mistakes, optimizes your type a lot, but you can optimize things to hell and then disoptimize your mental health. And that's not a great balance, I think. So yeah, this is just does love
Uh,
kerning, probably.
Yeah, Micah has a great follow-up question. Do you have different approaches to kerning based on the size of the family?
Yeah, and not only in the size of the family, but what Juan just said, in the scope, in the purpose, in the time, in the budget. So it depends. I can't believe it's been like 38 minutes and I've only said depends twice. Because depends, if you've been my student, is my favorite answer to everything. It depends on, I have a friend who's a biologist, so it depends on the species is a big meme for them. And it depends on the project, it depends on the type, is a big meme for me because it's true. Like if you have a single display font that is going to be used in one project, setting 3 headlines that you know of, don't kern it unless like there is a A and a B, you know. But if you're selling a retail typeface that is going to be used by who knows, and probably end up in Linux and Microsoft and whatever, and like big documents, kern as much as you can, keeping your mental health, keeping your budget, keeping your time, and keeping your abilities of mastering. Like if you have a lot of budget, you can hire someone out. If you want to do it yourself, you can also do that. And it's also going to be like a good quality if you spend some time on it. So don't think that you have to go the full industrial scale if you're just starting out. Like it's okay to scale your processes to your type. And yeah, to think of the use, think of the scope of your type. Like that usually gives the most of the answers.
Yeah, I would add to like be smart and be strategic about kerning, because the first day it might be fun. The second day maybe not as fun. The third day you might be considering another career option. And that's never really a good thing because you're trying to make your typeface the best it can be, right? So I would say strategically, if you have a big family, I would probably kern the extremes, so the very bold weight, the very thin weight, and maybe see if you can interpolate the kerning for the middle ones. So only kern what you need, and there are tools that can help you, let's say, resize the kerning in multiple masters. Things that get a little bit too technical now, but basically be strategic, kern the thing, kern the extremes, and then you can probably figure out the in-betweens. And we've
Yeah,
been
I
talking
also
about it for too long. Sorry, Lynn, go ahead.
I know we should move on, but like I also wanted to forward this link that Dev sent in the host and panelists section of the Zoom of like, are there any thoughts on current on? And so this is like a gloves. I put it in the chat, but it's like a plugin for like a kerning assistant, if you will. And I think there's a lot of variations of idea. Like
Yeah.
people really, really want to spend less time on kerning. It is like an obsession, rightfully so, for a lot of people. And I have heard good things about Kernon as well. I think just one thing that I would like to note for folks who are starting out, I think it is important to try to do everything yourself for a little while, because kerning, just like anything else, has a lot to do with personal style and what your personal preferences are. So if you automate a lot of that from the beginning, you might not get to that point of like, what are my beliefs when it comes to kerning pairs, like how I kern, what do I look at? And I think it's all these tools and shortcuts are a great way, like when you know what is the end result that you want. But
Yeah.
if you start from there, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think, yeah. Yeah, plus 1,000 on that. Kern on, iKern, there's bubble kerning from Toshi. A lot of
Yeah.
tools that will help you if you know what they're helping you with. If you're only using them to finish kerning and do it, get it done, finish, I don't know, they probably will get you lost and you will never know what kerning is. It's not that difficult. It's just kind of tedious sometimes. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. I mean, kerning is like a huge topic. We could do the
Yeah,
like
we could do a
10 hours
whole
on
one on
kerning.
kerning.
All right. So I'll go on to the next question, which is I think I can combine these two questions. Are you able to give a simplified explanation of vertical metrics in Glyph, so I guess, or whatever other type design software, and what effects does this vertical metrics have on the font? And also, yeah, someone asked a question about like what does the behind the scenes look like when you're doing all of this font engineering stuff? And perhaps that can be packaged into one question.
Yeah, it's not glamorous at all. It's a sketchbook with notes and like the stamps measure something. It's just like noting all the info that I'm gonna have to remember and putting it where it belongs. So yeah, there's not. I don't know. I don't think this is like a canonical screenshot of I'm doing mastering. It's just like I'm opening the font and checking stuff about it and putting it where it belongs. So yeah, you could potentially like master a font just with glyphs. You know, you don't need like scripts. You don't need to go insane with anything else. You can do mostly anything with plain glyphs, with plain RoboFont. You know, it's kind of knowing what you're looking for. So that was kind of a little bit half of that. And the other one was the vertical metrics, right?
Yep.
The vertical metrics. A couple years ago, this would have been more of a fist fight. Right now, I guess the kind of the prevailing standard is just make HHEA and typo the same, and then adjust your maximum and minimum with when ascend, which is so much simpler than it used to be. Like when I started, it was a headache. It took me like I had bad dreams about not understanding vertical metrics. Not nice to remember that. Right now, because Chrome is so ever present and everything is based on Chromium, and like what's not based on Chromium kind of borrows a lot from them. And the desktop apps are less of a mess, and there's less apps that do weird things with fonts, and most of them do well with this scheme of vertical metrics. Exactly, like the Glyphs app tutorial, I think is a really good one, that overview of that. There's 3 sets of values in vertical metrics. This is because history. Don't get into it too much if you don't have to. There's Win, there's HHEA, and there's OS2. Right now, you can make HHEA and typo the same. And that the same is so that your regular glyphs, which in a Latin font is like your A to Z in lowercase, if those fit well and they have like a nice gap on top and the bottom, so that when you copy that and then you paste it, it has a nice line gap. That works, and most apps usually follow that, and you don't have any problems. And then you set the win values to the top uppermost point of your font, which is usually the A-ring acute that is not used, but it's there for some reason. And the lowest point in your font, which is usually a descender with the diacritic usually, or if you have like something that goes very down, like the go through all your glyphs via script or via looking at them, top and the bottommost point, those you put in win. And then in the other one, you put the same, just like a decent value that has a margin, and both line gaps go to 0. That's the super simplified part. That works. That works because software uses those values and renders type, and that works. So let's leave it at that, because that could also be like an hour-long thing on vertical metrics. If you're gonna be doing a lot of mastering, a lot of fonts from a lot of people, like it's nice to get into why all of those things do what they do. But to start with, just learn that thing and then implement it in your own fonts, and you'll be fine. Glyphs has a really good overview of that. Yeah, that's the 2024 answer. Some years ago, there would have been like, Carsten Lucas says this, Adobe says that, Microsoft says that, and in some apps that works good, but yes, yeah. Be grateful that we live in the simpler times.
Ask Ro again in 2030. Like, what'll be different?
I don't know. It's like VR is gonna mess up our metrics, and we're gonna have. I don't know. It might be
spatial depth.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. We have our next set of questions, which is what to check for. So I'll combine these two questions as well. Like the first question is from Tamara. Do you have any tips for self-publishing a font? What to check for? What's the minimum quality control settings? Like font bakery, and there's another like question about are there simple QA lists like there are for web dev? So I guess like best practices, like is there anything like out there that you're like check these things that are on this list or whatever have you?
Mhm. So when I got the question, like it was phrased that why are there no simple QA checklists like there are for web dev? I was like, that's a great question. We should totally make a simplified checklist one. I guess the answer is because we haven't made one simple and accessible, but it totally is like a bunch of steps. I'm actually referring back to the to the article I did with Ilya because I just went over that. But it's just like I usually start by visually checking outlines. There's no extra points, nothing is missing, that all the spacing is okay, that nothing slipped by. That's visually, and then that the code works. The substitutions or the open type things that the font might do, that those are there, that they work, and then the info, which is names, that it pops up in a menu. Okay, that the bold is named bold, the regular is named regular, that all of those things are correct. And then sometimes you have to do a little bit of post-production. For example, with variable fonts, you have to put a little bit of metadata in sometimes. But a great thing that we have right now is Font Bakery. It's a quality assurance tool for font people, for font makers. So it's actually it's not simple because there is a lot of code and tests that go into it, but the output that you get is relatively simple. Like you can it's a set of tests that you can put your fonts through. So you can say test the industry standard, all the industry standard things in my font, and it gives you back a lot of answers, like for example, all the naming passes, all the glyphs seem to be drawn right, so there is no technical problems with that. That might be design problems, but that's a part. What else? All of the technical stuff that you might go to the spec to check the specifications to check. Font Bakery kind of automates double checking that, so that is a really good thing to put your fonts through. I think there is since this year there is actually a web-based font bakery that's super more accessible to people that are maybe a little bit scared of like a terminal command lines. I think you can just drag and drop your fonts, tell it to give you industry standard tests, and it gives you like a bunch of pass this, fail that, warning this, warning that. That's very simplified already, but it's not always like super clear as a beginner, like what that fail means and how you fix it. That's where a lot of experience and asking people and Googling forums and that kind of thing comes in. But Font Bakery is a really great start. If your font passes like the industry standard and you get the muffin and all of the green stuff, you're good mostly. 90 high some percentage of people are not going to have an issue with your font if you publish it like that. So I guess that would be a great point to start. And again, like depends on the scope. If you're starting out as a small foundry, 1-person shop, 2-person shop, well, I mean, you don't have the resources and the time and the experience to do what, I guess, I don't know, Monotype does. So there is, but you also don't have like the expectations of a Monotype font, and that's good for you starting out. So yeah, I guess start with Font Bakery and start just checking that everything that the font should do, it does. I guess it's oversimplified, but that.
I would add that
Mhm.
step it's important, I think, in general, just to make sure your outlines, everything works. I recommend the Rosalie Wagner's talk, which covers kind of like a broad process for like a checklist. But I also get this question from like people who are just making a font for their friends or smaller clients. And in those cases, when the people using it is going to be a small, it might not be, you don't have to be as intense as checking everything necessarily. But if you are selling something retail and the client might be big, and then you might want to invest in hiring a font engineer, even if a consultant, to look over your file so that you spend less time, doing customer support and more time just trying to get different projects. So it's a really worthwhile investment in just general terms.
Yeah, I like that approach too. Like in terms of like when you have the budget, it is time for you to do it. But before that, perhaps maybe it is not yet the time, or you don't need to. It's optional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Oh, we have 6 minutes left. I would really like to go through these the next two questions, if that's okay with you, Ro.
Sure.
All right. So I wanted to combine like these two questions. There's one set and there's a second set. And so there are a lot of questions about like the role of a type designer versus like a type engineer. Like the whole idea of like type engineering. And so like Nick has this great question about how does the role of a type designer versus engineer differ when it comes to making a variable typeface versus a non-variable typeface? And I think
Interesting.
like this goes into the idea of like, like what it what is like an outlook of a font engineer as like things progress, because like you mentioned that like like AR will come and like everything will be different. So yeah, how do you envision these things?
Yeah, actually, the phrasing is great because variable fonts kind of force you as a designer to at least understand interpolation. Maybe not like the concept, like the mathematical stuff, even though it's pretty simple. It's just like dividing stuff. But you have to understand outline compatibility, and you have to and interpolation at least in a basic level. So that at least gives you a little bit of forces you to be a little bit of an engineer. I was thinking actually just before starting of a project that I helped Adriana Garcia Dueñas with, her Tlayuda, the beautiful monster. She has like a multi-axis variable font that expands and then does this and then goes, it does a lot of stuff. And so she had a design vision, she had a lot of outlines, she had a lot of sketches and like ideas. And I had her for a mentorship, I think. And that was kind of a consulting engineer kind of a role that I got into. It's like, okay, so in order to make this happen, you would have to draw this master and then this one and then this one and then this one and then 64 of them. And then make them compatible, and then we would have to name them like that, and then perhaps we would need to have like a kind of a special proofs that would allow you to check what you're doing in multiple dimensions. And then it's totally a collaboration because it's a good example because Adriana had the concept and the design, and I kind of had not really because we couldn't actually finish it and like actually make it work, but I had at least some of the notions of the engineering behind it. So it's kind of like a say an architect versus like a structural engineer. It's like I have the design for this and it's gonna swoop and there's gonna be floating stairs and the engineer is like, is that going to hold? What steel are we going to use for that? That's kind of the role of the engineer that we can take in like more advanced projects, advanced in the sense of complex, technically complex, of not just like a default that you would get in Glyphs, for example. And yeah, into the future, I guess. I don't know. I guess I mean we like to complicate things as designers. So with I guess like there will be more of like that collaboration of solving things in tandem. What was the other part of the?
I think
Oh
that's
yeah,
it.
no, I think
That was it. Yeah.
you answered. Yeah, that was it. And then the last set of questions is
Yeah.
about like
I just
type
want to clarify
design. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
on the type design engineer when it comes to variable
Mhm.
fonts. So when we're dealing with non-variable fonts, I think the path feels a little bit more straightforward because people have been dealing with that for a long time, as in the product itself being one single font file. There's more resources out there, but when it comes to variable font, things are changing because there's always like more support increasing and also more people that are designing variable fonts and then encountering that when you're making those into a product, you get more errors or errors that you're not familiar with. And a lot of that comes from the setup of the font file itself. So how do you set up properly? I feel like that is a question that you should probably experiment with at the very beginning. Just because I remember, recently we sometimes we are in conversation with font engineers. We make sure that they spend less time solving problems that could be solved at the design level.
Yeah.
Meaning like if you know interpolation, you know how to set up your masters, right? The extremes, that's a really good start for you to like start developing variable fonts. But again, I would probably recommend you check out the all the hard to read specs. Hard to read because it's a little bit dry, but if you're nerdy, I would recommend you checking those out to solve those issues. So for variable fonts, I would recommend experiment with the design space and test them out as fonts. And as you start seeing errors, then try to figure out how to solve those errors or before you get in too deep with your design space. Or yeah, have a friend like Ro so that can guide you
Yeah.
towards early on.
Yeah, Biro lunch, Biro coffee,
Yeah.
Pyro, all the different things.
Get a lot of
I know. I mean, it's engineering is such like valuable knowledge, and it's one of those things that is really not covered in any like educational program. Like I'm sure I think a lot of you in the chat like have already graduated or are going through design type design programs. And like we all know like these are all knowledge that was like really, really hard earned, like trial through fire, like years of
Yeah.
looking through forums. Like I mean, it's yeah, I'm just a lot of admiration for you, Ro. Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And
No, thank you for the
I
invitation.
Oh, of course. It's always so nice to hang out. And I wanted to pose this last question, if
Sure,
you're okay answering this one last
sure, sure.
question. I know we're on time. Thank you. There are a couple questions about like the challenges that you might have with the technical constraints of font engineering versus like things that a script or some aesthetics of a script might want to do. Like there's, for example, like the questions are like when you're designing scripts like Devanagari, or
Oh, right,
is type
sure.
design software like glyphs like very well suited, or do you find yourself like sort of working against it? And I think there was another question from Elgene that was very much related about like what kind of challenges do you encounter when you are balancing like the technical constraints with like the aesthetics,
Mhm.
especially when you're creating like things for multiple platforms, multiple languages and such, like that tension between what
Yeah.
what you want to make or what things want to be doing versus like the technical considerations.
That's interesting. I guess I'll go with the first one first. I don't have like personally a lot of, if not almost any hands-on experience with things that are not Latin or Latin adjacent. Like I've done a lot of Cyrillic, but that's very similar to how Latin typesets, so I don't consider it like too difficult. But the further you stray from Latin 1, the less automated and pre-built and pre-decided things are. So the less hegemonic, white-centric, obviously, you are, the more you have to know, and the more you have to sometimes fix other expectations that, index should work like this because it's easy for us as engineers in Microsoft. I'm just blaming it on them. I'm not sure if that's actually their fault. But sometimes they do something, and then the actual designers who are new generations from, let's say, India, they start drawing things and they start to try to make things happen. And then the spec is like, that's not going to be easy for you, or that's not going to be supported. And that's when you start to fight. Like the further, the further out you go from like just a simple block with a letter and then another one and then another one, maybe kerning. the more you're going to have to know what you're doing. Like go back to what Lynn said about kerning. Actually, first know what you want the type to do and what you want to get your design and your type family and your type software to do, and then you check that against the spec. If it's relatively hegemonic, there will usually be either an example or a way to do it, or like it's okay, it's there. The further you get into it, you have to like sometimes work around that or patch it or know where the special naming for, say, I don't know, Thai or Arabic is or something. So yeah, that's where knowing a little bit of programming and like the inner workings helps a lot more, because then you can like know which wires to cut and disconnect and like make your own things. And then you're not only relying on what somebody else already automated and preset and made a workflow, because those people are usually white hegemonic. So yeah, but there are a lot of, for example, like more community efforts. I think Glyphs is pretty good. This is what I've heard. I know English and Spanish, like Latin, not really my expertise, but I've heard from Lippy, she's a great friend from India, that Glyphs is relatively good. Like they do a different naming, for example, than RoboFont that seems to be easier, shorter, more comfortable. And that's because I think Georg and Rainer worked with people from India, asked them what they needed, and they implemented, and that's great. I know that right now, Frederick, who does RoboFont, is working with Namrata, also from India, also great. And they're doing basically the same thing. Like, what do you guys actually need? Let's make it happen. So yeah, there's the less white hegemonic you are, the more you're gonna have to work for it, but the more worthy I think that is to do. So that's great, do it. And again, reach out to your community. If you're doing, I don't know, index, then ask around who's doing that. Arabic type is, Arabic, Jad says in the chat. Arabic is complicated because it's not just simple dumb, like Latin dumbness. You have to, there is a lot of actually engineering already in the spec for Arabic, but I'm not sure it's always as appropriate as Arabic designers would want it to be, or as flexible, or as, I know there's many alternatives. Decotype, I think, comes to mind as an alternative to Arabic, the standard thing. And if they made that typesetter from scratch for their own needs, it's because they wanted to do stuff that the standard one doesn't. So yeah, there's not many more of those for Latin because they're already solved. So I guess that gives you some of the answer. The other half was, I got lost in this answer.
I think you answered both. Yeah, I mean, I will also like say like what you just a +1 to what Rose said about just talking to the folks who are making the software, because it's not like Adobe or anything where there's like a bazillion people doing, running like hundreds of like focus groups or whatever have you. Like it really is just a couple of people, maybe even extra freelancers if they have the budget, like just working in like a room or even a virtual room. So if you like talk to them with like, hey, I need this to work like this, but it doesn't. I think you'll find that like they're very, very nice people who will be more than happy to work things out and update things and all these different things.
Yeah, that is actually kind of why I landed and I stayed in font mastering, because the tools are made by people that I know that are nice, and they are very hackable and customizable and upgradable. So I'm not stuck paying whatever Adobe wants me to do with their thing and doing it the way Adobe wants me to, because I can just email Frederick about a question. How do I do this? And he's super quick. Frederick is like the guy who writes RoboFont, and he's super quick to answer. Like, yeah, this is a code example, and he saved my bacon many times. That doesn't happen with Adobe. And then if you can't do that with RoboFun, you can make an extension that helps you with that. You can make a script. And so, yeah, it's the software land in Type is pretty nice. I enjoy working. I think that's why I like doing mastering, because the tools are very, obsessive mind programmer friendly, and that's kind of me. So yeah.
That's so cute. It's like a little cottage with like things remind you of like your friends and people around you. And
Very DIY in a nice way.
I love it. There's so many things about like the type design industry where like maybe from the outside looking in, it just seems like big things happening by like lots of people, but it's really just like a little village of people making little things.
Yeah. For example, like now that AI is super in vogue, that's a whole can of worms. But I think like Type AI, who's going to do that? Who's going to invest the time and money to like make a huge language model of type? Like, I think we're safer from this than many other professions, because like it's our nerd club. It's gonna be fine-ish, hopefully.
There's not enough
There's not
data.
enough money in it.
Yeah, there's not enough money either. Yeah, what could the world's best kerning AI earn from the community? Probably not that much.
Probably not that much. Yeah. So it's a double-edged sword. The way we have to do everything ourselves, but if we do everything ourselves, it's nicely homemade. You know, the people, it's hackable. So I think it's a nice balance.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this. Has been so much fun, and we've learned like so much. I mean, thank you so much. Is there, I mean, before we wrap up the conversation, is there anything that you want to plug? Like anything that's coming up that's cool for you? I've already dropped Ro's socials in the chat, so please go follow Ro. All the cool things. Check out Ro's feature fonts page. But is there anything else you want to plug, Ro?
Before I do like the actual, just like a disclaimer, every time I talk about mastering, I like to say this. If you can read and write even like basic-ish English and use a translator, you can do type mastering. It just takes time and a little bit of like focus, especially if it's for your own fonts. Like, don't be super scared of like, this is something that I could never get into. You can. If you can understand what I'm saying right now, I think you can. That sometimes it takes away my clients, but I don't like to gatekeep, like it's like, oh, this thing up in the Olympus. It's like, no, I'm just a nerd. I've read the spec a lot of times. If you do that, like, you'll get there. So that's one thing. So please get into it. Ask me questions. I'm open for emails and things. I usually take a while to answer, but I will answer. And now the plug, actually. Letrastica is coming up. I'm going to be there if you want to hang out, if you want to talk to me or like chat. I'll be translating, so I might be a little bit MIA, but I'll be there. And we're going to be selling some stuff in Letrastica, like some posters and some, actually this notebook. I'll go ahead and announce it, because I'm already there. I'm gonna be making more of these. If you wanna get it, it will be available in Guadalajara. It's a really nice notebook that I've been playing with. I needed another one, and so I've made more. And yeah, what else? Sorry?
Does it come with your sketches, or is it just the empty?
This one does, but I'm not sure I'm selling this one because I do have some stuff to scan still.
All those gems.
Limited edition, original sketches.
We have this one here. Oh my God, it's blurring out, but it's the little hand. Yeah. Be at Letrastica. It's really cool. We can talk there. And if you need like any consulting, if you have any projects that you're stuck on, we probably can help. Have a great team that is Miguel, who's a great engineer, Carly, who's our amazing office manager, who makes my life work and not cry all the time. And then, so we're open for engineering stuff. If you want to hit us up at hola@tortilla.studio or in the website. So yeah.
Yay! Yeah, so definitely do all of those things, 100%. Alrighty, thank you all so much. So excited to see you at in Guadalajara, Ro and
Yeah,
Juan.
yeah,
We'll
it's
have a great
coming up.
time.
Hopefully, I'll see a lot of you from the chat and
Yes.
you
If you're
too.
coming, let us say hi.
Yeah, yeah. I see
Yeah.
some folks in the chat who are coming too. So, shout out. Woo! All right.
Awesome.
All right, amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great, day, evening, morning, wherever you are. All righty. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.